una botella. Diario van los bailes y se compra una botella. Se arranca la banda con la primera canción. Y la chona luego busca bailador. Y la chona luego busca bailador. La gente la mira y le empieza a gritar. Bravo, chona, nadie te puede igualar. Bravo, chona, nadie te puede igualar. Y la chona se mueve y la gente le grita. No hay mejor que la chona para la quebradita. Y la chona se mueve al ritmo que le toquen. Ella baila de todo, nunca pierde su trote. Y gózame, rodilla.
Woo. Okay. Here we go. Here we go. Let me close my blind a little bit back here. Let's get started. Starting with some Chona, the classic Tucanes song. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but I grew up with that song. And given that it's a summer day, we have one more month of this beautiful summer. So let's do this. Welcome, everybody. Let me go into today's class. Can someone let me know if you can hear me okay? I have to turn down my sound so that it doesn't sound all crazy. So, Tlaxcamati, everyone, welcome, welcome. Let me get my little slide going. Awesome. Thank you so much, Diana. Thank you, Ultracron. Diana Villa, what's up, sister? Okay, let's get this going. First and foremost, I hope you have all been safe. I hope you have all been well. I hope you have all been doing the best that you can to keep safe mentally, physically, emotionally. Our last class was July 3rd, I believe. And that was E-Decolonize number 10. It was amazing. I want to thank all of you who attended as many courses as you could. It was totally amazing. And then after that, I met up with some of my students on a personal meet and greet. I did invite everyone who filled out a Google form, to join me with that. So it was really, really amazing to build community and to come together and to talk a little bit more in depth about the topics that I had covered and need to colonize. So without further ado, let's get into this. So my name is Citlali Mina Nawak. I am a historian, poet, and activist for the last 23 years. I am doing this as a free service for my people because I believe in free access to education, to our decolonization, to our liberation. And so this, for those of you who don't know, this is a continuation over the summer. I don't work over the summer. So what I wanted to do, and because I have a health condition, I wanted to do something, productive, something for our community. And so I had just finished my internship. For those of you who don't know, I have a bachelor's and master's in history. My goal is to teach history at a community college level. And so I figured rather than wait to be hired and to be taken on by a certain institution, I figured why not start teaching now? Why not start teaching on YouTube for free, making it accessible? Not everyone has the privilege of going to college. Not everyone has the time, effort, access to go to college. So to me, I wanted to present to you everything that I have learned in a way that's empowering, in a way that's inclusive to everyone, regardless of your educational background, and regardless of your age as well, right? Because a lot of times people get caught up in sounding very academic, sounding very smart, intellectual, but that's not what this is about. I want this to be understood by as many people, by as much people in our community, because as myself in this journey, I think it is my goal to facilitate and to make things easier. I want to facilitate knowledge. I want to share knowledge. I don't want to complicate, right? Knowledge. And so, all right, so everyone, welcome to E-Decolonize class number 11. And that was another thing. I wasn't sure if I was going to start a new semester or whatever the wording I was going to use. But you know what? Let's just continue, right? So let's continue. Let me give a shout out to the people tuning in right now. What's up, Diana? Altiran Kaiju, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. Christopher, Daniel, what's up, everyone? Thank you for joining me. I know it's a beautiful hot day today, beautiful summer day. So let's get into it. There's a lot to cover. So today's class, as we continue, right, we have a Google form that I create for every course because I am very interested in learning about you. I'm interested in learning about your perspective, your reflection, your feedback on what it is that I present in this class. It's very important, especially right now that we can't meet in person. I take it very serious, because I'm always looking for ways to improve my teaching, my approach, my resources. So many things. So I thank you. If you could take the time to fill that out, that helps me in my own growth as a historian, as an activist, as a poet, as a person, right? Because we should all be always trying to get ourselves to be improved and to perfect as much as we can, right? Our skill. So yes, so today's class is today on a beautiful Sunday. Not sure if I'm going to teach this class every exactly a month apart, but I want to do a monthly course on different topics, and we'll get to that. So today the topic is, what is decolonization? And I'm going to go over some tips and suggestions when dealing with haters. And the reason I'm doing this is because I had a lovely meet and greet with some of my students, and some of the things that really stood out to me was, when they asked about, how do I deal with family? How do I deal with people that are like trolling me online? And how do I deal with like this negative energy that comes to you, right? As you're trying to debunk this whole system of colonization. And it could be very heavy, right? It could be very heavy. And so I'm very, very excited to be able to put together. I don't have that many images today, because I usually like to put a lot of images, but I wanted to kind of give you a run through, right, about what I try to do. And what I'm presenting to you comes from 23 years of trial and error, 23 years of beautiful lessons, harsh lessons, un poquito de todo, un poquito de todo. Okay, so today's class is, what is decolonization? A brown woman's perspective on how to navigate colonialism, machismo, and self-worth in the journey for self-love, liberation, and decolonial approach to life, right? I know it's a lot. It's a lot. So let's get to it. Let's get to it. A lot of you may be joining me for the first time today, and I wanted to kind of give you a run through on what exactly is E-Decolonize. And I welcome those of you that are continuing this class. I thank you for being here with me again. Those of you who are new, welcome. I hope you continue and join us every month. So basically, E-Decolonize, like I said, I was inspired because I had just finished my teaching internship for Los Angeles Community College District. One of my biggest goals is to be a historian. And so when I finished that, I felt, okay, I have my degree, I have this internship under my belt, I have the preparation. So I felt confident, I felt prepared to be able to do this, right? And so E-Decolonize is a free online course to educate and empower my community. What I plan to do is I merge activism, poetry, self-education, and academia to present knowledge and wisdom for transparent and updated decolonial approaches to our Indigenous liberation. So basically, I'm using YouTube as a free platform to encourage accessibility and democratize education. Like I mentioned before, it's important to me. I feel that the more that we know, the more we should share. The more that we know, the more we should try to help others, right? Especially people that are just starting this journey of decolonization. It is vital. I think, I believe, I'm committed to making someone else's process a bit more easier, more humane, more compassionate. And that's what this class is about. Okay, who else is joining us? We have Melissa Joy. Hola, hola, Melissa. Insurrection. What's up, Insurrection? Ray Pelchat. Hello from the Mohawk Nation. Awesome. We have our relatives from the Mohawk Nation. Welcome, welcome. All right, so let's get into it. Like I said, E-Decolonize. There was 10 courses, 10 classes that I taught over the summer, and this is a continuation of what's going to happen, right? So this is class number 11. And to kind of cover some of the background of this class, I do try to, I'm very intentional with this hour. Sometimes we may go over a little bit over the hour. Today I started a little late. I had trouble with my Zoom. I do apologize for that, but I genuinely do like to start right on time. Probably play some music, whatever I'm feeling at that day. So basically, yeah, so monthly, E-Decolonize will now be held on a monthly basis. And I'll be announcing the course and date on YouTube and my website. Like I said, I have a Google feedback form that is provided in the video description of each session. And what to expect now that we're not doing this weekly, I want to expand a little bit more, right? So I want to include more topics on decolonization, identity, interviews, and art. So our 10-week course was very, very structured. I had a syllabus because I had that time to do that. And so now, I'm back to work full time. I'm doing other things as well. So I want to make it more expanded more to include more topics, right? Things that are not generally covered as far as academia, like mental health. I want to talk about some artists that are coming up from our community, because everyone has something to teach. Everyone has something to contribute to this conversation. So I'm trying to be very, very intentional about that. The class norms, for those of you who know, they're going to remain the same. No toxic comments or interactions will be accepted. You will be blocked after the first warning. And what I like to do in this class, it's a collective approach to doing this, right? So that means that you as a student have the power and the right, if you see, very disgusting comments being put down in the comment section, I give you the permission to block and delete that person. I work really hard for this. We're all coming together. I want to make this as positive, constructive, and intentional as possible. We don't have much time, so I don't deal with that. And so that's part of my class norms. This is recorded live. I am right now live on Tongva territory. It's like I said, Sunday, September 6th. And the videos, these courses are made available immediately after. As soon as we finish the course, I go in there, I probably add a little bit more details to video description, and bam, it's ready for you. If you couldn't catch us live, watch us whenever you can. That's the beauty of having it on YouTube. Contributions are welcome. I do this for free, absolutely free, but I always welcome, right? A lot of people like to support my work. A lot of people want to support paying my gas when I have to go speak somewhere, or printing materials, or just the time and labor it takes to do this. So I welcome it. Again, this is absolutely free, but if you want to contribute to my work and what I'm doing, these are the avenues for you to do so. I have Zelle through my email, Cash App, and Venmo. So putting it out there. And those of you who have contributed and who have assisted me, especially in the summer that I don't work, I work for a school district. And as you know, we don't get paid over the summer. So I am very grateful, and I appreciate everything you've done to support me. Okay, so here we go. All right, let's do this. So the topic today, like I said, is decolonization, right? So today's class session number 11 is on decolonization, tips and suggestions. Again, these tips and suggestions come from my personal experience. It comes from experiences that I've had in the community, experiences with other warriors, right? Because we're all learning here together. And so, but before we get into some of the tips and suggestions, I think it's important to define, right? I think it's important to define, what is colonization? Like, what is this word? What does this mean? And so I think the language that we're using to talk about these ideas are very important. And so what is colonization? There's a lot of definitions, but the one that I am boiling it down to, it's this one. I believe this came from the Merriam-Webster's definition. And it says, what is colonization? Colonization is the action or process of settling among and establishing control over the indigenous people of an area. Okay, that is the traditional term of colonization. Okay, that's the definition. Now, what is decolonization, right? And it's really, really important to note that decolonization, it's not the opposite of colonization, right? It's a lot of people could say it could be literal, like, oh, you just uncolonize, right? You just leave those territories. You just, yes, that could be part of it. But in the definition that I'm going to provide to you, it's a little bit deeper than just the opposite of colonization, right? So the definition I'm using is, what is decolonization? This is not the opposite of colonization. This is a multifaceted process that involves personal, communal, and at times national, and I use that because that's a construct of white supremacy, national efforts to heal and expel the damages done to the land, to the people, in the environment of the area previously owned, occupied by the original people. Okay, so let's go over that again. It is not the opposite of colonization. Decolonization is a multifaceted process that involves personal, communal, and at times national efforts to heal and expel the damages done to the land, people, and environment of the previously owned and occupied by the original people. So it is important to understand that, right? It's not just, oh, we're just going to unsettle and that's it, because there's been a lot of damage done, right? You can't just leave. Like, no, it's a process that is integrated into the economy, that is integrated into the culture. So there's just so much, right? So those are some of the key concepts that I wanted to define. Also, what is Eurocentricity? What is white supremacy? It's important for us to understand that once colonization is established, right? And this is the continental experience as indigenous people. This experience was also felt by Africa, by Asia, by Southeast Asia, the Middle East. I mean, it's impacted, right? Colonization and the continuation of white supremacy. It is a continuing global experience, right? And so that physical action of colonization is supported by an ideology that fuels and reinforces that takeover, that domination of land and people. And when we break it down and we look away from colonization, we're looking now at the mindset, the ideology. What is fueling these actions? What is fueling these people? And so Eurocentricity is a worldview that is centered on Western civilization, or a biased view that favors it over non-Western civilization. All good things come from Europe. The rest come from non-white, non-Western peoples. It's a simple definition, right? So basically, Eurocentricity looks at the world as all the good stuff came from Europe, all the bad stuff came from all over the world, right? Another aspect of Eurocentricity is diffusionism, right? I didn't put it on here, but diffusionism is saying that Europe is the center and foundation that diffuses ideas outward, right? It's never the recipient of knowledge, it's never the recipient of civilization, but it points itself on a pedestal, right? And it centers itself saying, I give you knowledge, I give you civilization. So that's the whole logic of imperialism and colonization, which we'll get into. Now, as far as what is white supremacy, white supremacy, I don't like the concept white supremacy just alone, even though I do use it, people are familiar with it. I like to add white supremacy terrorism. I like adding the term terrorism to white supremacy because white supremacy can tend to sound a little euphemistic. Like white supremacy, it sounds like it's actually validating the domination of whiteness, over the world. And I have a problem with that. So I like to use white supremacy terrorism, white supremacy genocide, white supremacy terror, like terms to kind of define it a little bit more and not just take it as a given, right? Like white supremacy, like it sounds kind of celebratory and I have a problem with that. But anyway, so I found a really great definition to this by one of our peoples. Her name is Elizabeth Betita Martinez. She is a writer, Chicana activist, and I really like the way she summarized it. She boiled it down to what this means, right? And so her definition is, what is white supremacy? And in her definition, she says white supremacy is a historically based, institutionally perpetrated system of exploitation and oppression of continents, nations, and peoples of color by white peoples and nations of the European continent for the purpose of maintaining and defending a system of wealth, power, and privilege. Woo, okay, she put it together really well, right? So again, what is white supremacy? It's historically based, institutionally perpetuated system of exploitation and oppression of continents, nations, and peoples of color by white peoples and nations of the European continent for the purpose of maintaining and defending a system of wealth, power, and privilege. We look at the United States as a colony, right? This is an occupying force. We're looking at the countries like Mexico. Mexico's also a colony of Spain. They called it Mexico. Supposedly it went to independence. No, it did not. You know, Spaniards and Europeans still dominate Mexico. They still dominate a bunch of other so-called Latin American countries. So, you know, the system of white supremacy establishes itself, you know, the whole colonization aspect of it, genocide, slavery, and to maintain this system of power and economic domination, right, comes these layers of culture, of knowledge, of institutions that all work hand in hand to fuel this system, this institution of white supremacy, to the point where, you know, people are so used to it and have normalized it as if it's natural, right? People naturalize this thinking like, oh, that's just the way it is, or that's just the way it's always been. And I'm sure you've heard this argument. I hear it all the time. But what would we be without Spaniards, right? What would we be without white people? Like, there's just this very ugly hierarchy that we place ourselves in as indigenous people, as non-Europeans, right? And that comes through centuries of this system that is in all of this, right? It trickles down through the culture, through the mainstream media, through education. Every aspect of these institutions are meant to preserve, maintain, and defend the system of wealth. So that to me was an amazing definition. I think she's clear, she's to the point, and it tells you just how powerful this oppressive, terror is, right? Because this is terrorism, what the system is all about. And so I wanted to also get into Aníbal Quijano, right? He passed a few years ago, but he was a Peruvian sociologist and humanist thinker known for having developed the concept of coloniality of power. And what I'm going to do is at the end of our session, I'm going to link his article that he wrote that has been translated into many languages, but I'll go ahead and link it in Spanish and English. It's called, the title, you could Google it too. It's called Coloniality of Power. And I came across him about 2 years ago when I was working on my thesis, and I was completely like amazed, right? Because as a historian in the US, you know, we're very confined to US historians, you know, majority European historians. And so when I started finishing up my thesis, I really started to look at thinkers, and I was looking for non-white historians. I was looking for non-white, sociologists, philosophers, because I really wanted to center our perspective, right? And a lot of the times those historians and those thinkers don't get the credit that they deserve, because again, it doesn't pertain to whiteness. It doesn't reinforce white supremacy. And so he is one of the ones that I definitely was so excited to learn about. Not only, you can also, watch his speeches. Not only is his writing powerful, but he's confronting the whole idea of Eurocentricity in so-called Latin America. You have to watch him speak. I mean, it's all Spanish language, the way, because that was his main language of expression. But if you can get your hands on it or watch it, watch his videos on YouTube, it is amazing. So what is coloniality of power? And I know some people think colonial, decolonization, decolonial. He basically wraps it up, and I love it because he is like kind of putting it in terms that encapsulate like everything that's happened on the continent, as far as our peoples, right? So it really addresses the pan-indigenous experience in a way that helps connect the dots of white supremacy terrorism. So coloniality of power is a concept that it's interrelating the practices and legacies of European colonialism in social orders of forms of knowledge, advanced post-colonial studies, decoloniality, and Latin American subaltern cultures. Most prominently, a nivel Quijano, it identifies and describes the living legacy of colonialism and became integrated in succeeding social orders. The concept identifies the racial, political, and social hierarchical orders imposed by European colonialism in Latin America that prescribe value to certain people, societies, while disenfranchising others. And so, and this is powerful, right? Because even though he focuses strictly on so-called Latin America, again, he is Peruvian, he's talking about Ecuador, he's talking about Brazil and all that. He really takes it to point to really argue and say, you know, what happened in 1492, what happened under the Spaniards and other European peoples, it's not something that's long dead and in history and only exists in history textbooks. However, this has continued, right? This has continued. It lives in the culture. It lives in the institutions of knowledge and forms of knowledge. What knowledge is validated and embraced and accepted, which knowledge is looked down upon, right? And if you look at it, it makes sense, right? Indigenous knowledge is not validated. Indigenous knowledge is not legit. Indigenous knowledge is not scientific. And so you look at that culture of knowledge, and then they're looking at what is knowledge, what is power, you know, who sustains it, who benefits, and it's powerful. So anyway, so one of the biggest things that stood out to me from Aníbal Quijano, and it kind of bothered me at first because I was like, I don't know how I feel about that. But he says that European colonization, European imperialism, that it indigenized the world, right? That European invasions indigenized the world. And I was like, what does he mean by, right? Europeans indigenized the world. So what I understand that to mean is that the process of imperialism and European white supremacy terrorism, it kind of creates this binary of European invaders, indigenous peoples, right? No matter what part of the globe you are in, the fact that they invaded and that they terrorized, that they were the outside force coming in as a massive number to destroy, it kind of puts the world under this guise of indigenism, right? And indigenous just means not European. If you look at it, and we're being very critical on it, in which sometimes I have a problem, and this is a thing, right? There is no perfect language that we're using in under colonial conditions, but sometimes I have a problem with the concept of indigenous because I mean, it's what I can use to kind of relate and point out who we are as a people, but it also, you know, shows that white people are not considered indigenous, right? They're considered as the rulers, the dominators, the natural owners, and you know what I mean. They're never seen as indigenous, but yet we are indigenous, and it's a kind of a way to focus the identity on the natural people of this continent rather than calling European foreigners. So if you notice that emphasis, they rather emphasize on the indigenous population rather than the foreign presence, you know? And I think that's very purposeful, that's very intentional because it's not threatening and it's not really pointing out the accountability to European occupants, right? To European settlers. So again, the power of language, the power of how we are introduced these concepts and ideas, that blows my mind, right? So let's focus on indigenous people that are here naturally as part of the environment rather than focusing on European foreigners, European invaders, European settlers. So it's a way to kind of make them invisible, make their occupation invisible, and highlight the fact that we're here as indigenous people. But had the Europeans not invaded us, there wouldn't be such an emphasis on being indigenous because we wouldn't have that binary, if that makes sense. Whew, I'm telling you, I'm telling you. Okay, so now that we've covered the concepts and key terms and went over a little bit of the philosophy and the theory of decolonization, it's time to get to the nitty gritty. Okay, so how we doing? How's everyone doing? Indigenous Beauty joined us. Ray Spencer joined us, and we have Isaac Cordero Gonzalez from Peru. Hey, Peru, our people in Peru. Welcome, welcome. Spencer, what's up? Okay, so now we're going to get into some of the more conversations that we need to have, right? So I like to kind of give a universal, kind of like a big panoramic view of decolonization. And what we're going to go into now, we're going to go into the deeper, more personal, more kind of like a daily aspect. Sorry for the glare back here. Anyway, um, so yeah, so let's get into it, right? Let's get into it. And again, these are tips and suggestions. Not everything I say is absolute truth. We are on these journeys, but this is what I can present to you at this point, at this time, in this space, right? All right, so decolonization and worldview. Basically, what we're trying to do here, we're trying to create a shift in the way that we understand power and social hierarchies, right? And I think one of the biggest things is to decentralize Eurocentrism, right? We're trying to get ourselves away from this view of the world as we are eternally powerless, we're eternally submissive, we're here on their land, we're here as illegals, right? We're really creating a shift in the way that we view the world, that we view ourselves, that we view each other. And it's very, very, very intense, right? And I think if we can talk about this more and facilitate this conversation, it always helps, right? And so let's start off, because when we decolonize, before you go out to other people, before we go out to, excuse me, to the community, we always have to start with the self, right? We have to start with me, myself. What am I doing? How have I been impacted? How does this reflect generations of colonization? Okay, so decolonization and self, right? These are some of the questions I want you to ask yourself, right? Maybe write in a journal. Maybe you can answer these questions for me on the Google feedback form. But anyway, these are questions that we should be thinking about as we are thinking about this concept of decolonization, right? So basically, how have I been impacted by colonization? It sounds very general, right? Very general. So let's kind of break that down. How does colonization impact the way I view my body and my features, right? Even that, starting there, just starting there, right? If you are dark brown skin, how has it impacted you? If you look more the indigenous, whatever that idea is, to someone else, how does that impact you, right? It's very personal, it's very physical, it's very physiological, and it's really, really impacting our mind and how we view ourselves. That's key, right? What are some of the steps I can take to begin the process of centering my self-worth, collective presence, and voice, right? So now that we're creating this awareness is, and basically at the end, I believe the most powerful aspect of decolonization, it's a way to honor yourself, because you understand that you come from a line of indigenous people, of indigenous folks, of resistance, of resilience. And so if you can validate, empower, and love this person that you are in, that is an offshoot of a presence that's been ancestral for thousands of years on this continent, and you recognize that connection between you and your ancestors, it's a very powerful thing and a very powerful process for you to honor that, right? And I believe that's what is damaging a lot of us, damages a lot of our communities, especially the youth, our parents, where we don't have that clear, transparent love for who we are, because we don't have the connection to our past. We don't have a connection to this, to this land, to this existence as indigenous people. And so, and the last question I want you to ask yourself is, how can I heal from the psychological trauma of self-hate and self-destruction? And that's personal, right? Like I said, this is personal. So what traumas are we talking about, right? What are some of the things that we do that are rooted in a self-hate that we don't even recognize as self-hate, right? And we're going to get into this a little bit more. But I think it's really important our as we begin our journeys is to look at these questions, right? Like, how can I be accountable for myself in this layer of colonization that I am in, right? Because we're all in different layers and we've all been affected differently. Colonization has impacted us differently, and it manifests in our whatever economic situation you're in, how indigenous you look or don't look, how connected you are to your culture or not. All of that has to do with the complexity of colonization. It's all rooted in how we perceive ourselves, right? And so let's get into, and one of the things that I always get, right, is I'm being asked about family, right? How does decolonization and how do our journeys impact our families, our relationships, our friendships? I mean, this is real stuff, right? So, and what I'm going to offer you is, so again, suggestions, right? Things that have helped me. And believe me, I've been on this journey for 23 years. I still don't get it right. Like, I'm still learning, I'm still adjusting and changing. And when I was way younger, I was a lot more, I'll give you some examples. I was a lot more like cutthroat. Like, I used to be very dogmatic, and I just, life taught me real quick, right? Life taught me real quick that that's not the way that we're going to help our community. That's not the way we're going to grow. And that's not the way we're going to heal. So what about our family, right? What about our family dynamics? The following are suggestions on how to navigate family and friends, right? So, for example, religion. Before I get into the specifics of religion, I want us to understand, and this is what I tell people when people are like, "Oh, but you're not Christian, but you're not Catholic," and so I kind of give them a anthropological view, right? Like, and I think it makes them understand a little bit more where I'm coming from. And I tell them, every group of the world, every particular group of the world, right, have developed their own view of the world and the universe, right? We all authored different origin stories. We all authored different ways to explain the world, right? And so, as far as religion goes, one of the things that I want us to ask ourselves is, what worldviews did our ancestors have? Right. And it wasn't a homogenous view of the world, right? Indigenous populations are diverse, are complex. There's so many origin stories. There's so many, interpretations to how we came to be and how we explained ourselves to the world. And so, also, how have those views been impacted by colonization, right? And I have a whole class where we talk about this. I have a whole class about how the Catholic Church and Christianity, how they worked, together with the Spanish armies and the colonial forces to really destroy any remnant of indigenous philosophy, culture, worldview. Anyway, that's a whole other class that I have. So you're welcome to look at that as well. Do I want to reclaim that world, right? Can I continue a European faith? Should I reject our European religions? And again, this is all up to you. I myself, I grew up very critical of the Catholic Church, of Christianity. I just saw too many bad things growing up that I already had like this kind of approach to that religion where I felt like it was a bunch of bogusness, not even knowing the culture, not even knowing the history. I just felt that it was very fake and inauthentic, and the way that people were being outreached, especially me, the way I was being outreached, it was very aggressive, very shameful, I didn't feel connected, right? So when I started learning a little bit more about my ancestral views of the world, I felt a sense of connection. I felt a sense of belonging because in my head it made sense, right? It made sense. And so yeah, so it made sense to me. And I was like, okay, well, this is making more sense. I may not know exactly where our ancestors came from or my particular, group or it came from, but it allows me to navigate this world in a way that honors my people more, in a way that honors my presence, in a way that honors our experience more. And so that just made me, really appreciate our ancestors views. It really made me appreciate what we're up against. As far as holidays, right, this is a big question that I get, like, how do we deal with holidays? How do we deal with Christmas? How do we deal with, and honestly, that all depends on your own family dynamic, right? I myself, like I said, I've been very, critical of Christianity and Catholicism. And so when I came to being old enough to actually like stay home or to not participate, I did that, right? And as I got older, I went through this part of my life where, like, for example, for for Thanksgiving, I would fast. I did that for a few years, maybe like 6, 7 years, where I and a group of friends would spend the day together. We would fast, right? We would fast on Theft Day as a way to honor, as a way to protest. And then as I got older, I realized, and again, everyone is different. This is just one of the views that I came across. But as I got older, I realized, you know what, like, I'm missing out on my family. Like, I hardly get to see some of my aunts and uncles. And so it took a different journey for me. And then I said, you know what, I'm gonna attend. I'm just not gonna eat the food. I'm gonna be there with my family, and I'm gonna share what I know, and I'm gonna take advantage of that time that we have together. And so just to show you, right, like, I went from this approach to viewing holidays to now being a bit more. I think more of the long time of quality time with families, and also that also had to do with my own growth, because, like I said, I went through a time where I was very dogmatic. I had nothing to do with Christianity, Christmas, and then I realized I can still be who I am. I can still know this about the world, and I can still go and hang out with my family, right? So long as I express to them. And it was very interesting, the conversations that we happened, right? The conversations we would have. And it came to the point where some of them were like, wow, like, I never thought about that, or I never viewed it like that. And that's very empowering, right? Because, like I said, I did go through that part of my life. Again, I've been learning this since I was 15, you guys. So I've gone through a lot of things, right? From thinking I'm better than everyone and I'm gonna like tell people what to do. And I went through that, right? And we're gonna get to that right now, to not going to any family function that had anything to do with Jesus Christ or anything to do with, to being a lot more in control of my presence, of my interactions. And I wanted to still spend time with family without having to, compromise who I was and who I am. And through now, luckily, I feel like I have a nice balance with that, because my family know, like, they know exactly where I stand. And some of them have joined me, right, in these views, and especially the younger generation, because again, this is an opportunity to educate, an opportunity to have a conversation. And yeah, so that's one. And now, freedom conversations. This is what I call freedom conversations, is challenging conversations regarding racism, colorism, and Eurocentricity in the home. Now, part of decolonizing is, and this is what I would say, part of decolonizing is having these conversations, right? If your prima was born and she's really dark skinned compared to the first prima that was born, you're looking at so many things, right? You're looking at so many things. And if you're in that conversation, if you're next to your tia and tío and they're talking about all this and you're just there quiet, like, in a way, I hate to say this, but in a way, it's like that silence of you knowing this and watching this racism and not intervening with it is actually contributing to the psychological damage that that child is going to have because of white supremacy racism. And so, it is uncomfortable, right? It is uncomfortable in our families, but we have to be the ones to break it. Like, I know in my family, it's been uncomfortable, right? It's been uncomfortable in my family. I'm a little more of the light skin of my family, but in my family, we are all shades of brown, beautiful dark brown, lighter brown. And so I've had to have those conversations, right? With my own sister. I have two sisters. I have a young sister that's 21 now, and she is beautifully dark skinned, right? And then I have a 26-year-old sister that's lighter skinned. And so my little sister, I remember her coming to me and saying, why wasn't I born like you and my other sister? Why wasn't I born like you and mom? Like, what's wrong with me? Like, why do I look like this? Why do I look dirty? And I'm like, how do you, oh, it broke my heart, right? Because it's like, how do I explain this to her? She was like 8, 9 years old. um and it just shows you like that damage of, ay, que güerita, ay, she's so light skinned, or her green eyes, or her blue eyes, like this obsession with white features. And the closer you are to whiteness being celebrated, and like when you're doing that, the darker child in the family, the darker parent, start developing certain views about themselves, start developing, reinforcing views about whiteness, that as they grow up, they're going to suffer, right? They're going to suffer the consequences of all this, right? Of that psychological trauma. And so it's important that in our families, if we are witnessing that, if we see people that are going through that, that we be that person that intervene, respectfully, however dynamic you have with your family. Some of us have relationships that we can straight out say what we're thinking and like call it out. Some of us could be a little bit more gentle in how we do things. But it's still conversations that must be had, right? Confront colorism in our families. That is, I think, obligation that we all have, because again, if we know this and we know how detrimental it is, and we don't say anything, that is contributing to that child's psychological well-being, and it's not going to be a positive one. So, and just to kind of give you an example, my own grandmother, she's already passed, 2018. But with her, like, I grew up listening to her say, I, marry a güero, marry para mejorar la raza, right? And I was like a teenager, I really didn't think much about it. But as I got older, like, I continued hearing that, right? And it was a normal concept in my family. And I was like, it angered me, but it also made me curious, right? So as I got older, and I would spend a lot of time with my grandmother, a lot of time with her, and I just decided I'm just gonna ask her, right? I'm just gonna, instead of judge, instead of getting all, like confrontational with my grandmother, I'm gonna sit and ask her, like, and I did. I said, Grandma, like, why do you say those things? Or like, who taught you to say that? Or when was the first time you heard that growing up? And she would tell me, like, in her honest truth, like, oh, mija, pues así me criaron, eso me decían a mí, like, that's the way they raised me, that's what they would tell me. Um, and it was like real conversations that I had with her, because again, she wasn't already in her 70s, and I'm trying to understand her, right? Rather than judge, and rather than see her as a self-hater, but just like understand where she was coming from, because this language that we use in our families, it comes from centuries ago. So how is it that we in our society now are still using this language of bettering the race, and mixed race is something that comes from white supremacy terrorism, from centuries of genocide. So the fact that we nonchalantly could talk about these things, and like it's a normal thing, like that's just the way it is, that really needs to be debunked, right? It needs to be confronted. um okay, so I know we're getting close to the end, but we're gonna go maybe another 15 minutes, because there's some very important aspects of this I want to talk about. And I want to talk about decolonization and machismo, right? Decolonization and machismo, this is important, vital information, vital perspective, because I have seen how toxic these two combinations have been, right? And so let's get into that, right? So sexism in decolonization. How does colonization impact the way I view myself as a woman, man, non-gender conforming being? How does sexism limit my expressions, options, and perspectives? I wanted to talk about this because when I started my decolonization journey, I had a partner who was also decolonizing, but he would. This is like no shade to him, right? We're all growing up. We were young. We're like 19, but he would like tell me, "Oh, like if you don't cook for me, if you don't know how to cook, you know how to clean. Like you're not being a good Mexica wife. You're not being a good Mexica, woman to me." So I was like, what? Like, and let me tell you, I was too young to understand what was happening. Like, I was like, yeah, you're right. Like, I'm reading that Mexica women were cooks and this and that. But you see what I'm saying? He was decolonizing, but he was still holding on to machismo, like in a weird, twisted way, trying to like validate his view of women, even though he was trying to decolonize, right? And I was guilty too, because I was there too. I was like, that's right, I have to learn how to cook and clean. And like, oh my gosh, like I read the daily life of the Aztecs and everything I read. And you know what I'm saying? And I was young, he's learning, I'm learning. I was in love, he was in love. But the way that he was interpreting his decolonization and the way it affected the gender dynamics in our relationship, and the way that I was kind of like, okay, yeah, that makes sense, shows you the danger of not confronting machismo in our community as we are decolonizing, and so, and I wanted to talk about that because I've seen nowadays the same things, right? Where there's not a clear understanding of how complex our gender roles were as indigenous people. Like it was, there's a sense of masculinity, of femininity. There's so much, but to the fact of using that Western Eurocentric view of masculinity, which is machismo, because machismo is not an indigenous concept. Machismo is a European learned behavior that came from Europe. And believe me, there's tons and tons of receipts on that, right? But yeah, so just to kind of show you the danger of that, like you could be decolonizing and thinking you're like, you're good, right? You're good. You're gonna get your woman to do this and your woman to do that. But then you are reinforcing machismo. And it's like until we can clearly confront that, it's like we are harming ourselves, right? Even if you're doing the best you can in love and trying to grow and build together, the fact that you're still bringing in these ideas of machismo and viewing women as your inferior, that's not going to be a healthy outlook for your life, for your children, for your wife, for your partner. Anyway, I wanted to talk about that. Also, rooted in patriarchal white dominance and approach to power, how do my relationships reinforce patriarchy or machismo, gender roles, family relations, power, child rearing, home chores, romance? Like, and I'm telling you, this gets really personal, right? For those of you who have partners, like, how do you navigate what is a woman's role in your household? What is a male's role in your household? And believe me, like, this is things that we're not even aware of. Like, we're so accustomed to this machista view of family dynamics that we normalize it, right? For example, in with my husband, like I noticed at first, he was raised traditionally and kind of didn't say it, but kind of expected kind of like the woman role, like clean cook and all this stuff. And then I was like, and I, like I'm learning, we're both learning together. But it came to a point where I was like, yo, like we are the way I view our marriage, the way I view our relationship is like we are equally coming to this together. Like I am not going to do an expected role just because I am female or I'm a woman. And I don't expect you to do certain things just because you're male or you're a man. And so that took time, right? Because it's like we normalize like house chores. Like, oh, the woman always has to clean the house. The woman always has to do this. The man always has to like take care of the car or whatever. And it's like, we don't think about it, but it's real, right? We don't think about it, but it's real, because these things also come from a very European machista lens, right? And so you have to work through these things, because you're going to have children. They're going to learn this. They're going to think it's normal and it's natural, and it's not, right? We're building partnerships. We're building communities. And if you together are aware of this and still want to do that, that's a different story, right? Because you're fully aware, fully conscious, and are still practicing this, and that works for you, that's different, right? But I'm talking about the assumption, the expectation that a woman is going to clean, cook, and work full time and go to school. And no, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. So my advice is to be very clear with whomever you're with, whoever you're dating, whoever you're seriously considering, is to have these conversations beforehand, right? Say, you know what, this is my understanding. This is the type of person I am. This is what I will do, what I will not do. And like, for example, last names, right? Today, to this day, a lot of women still take on the husband's last name, right? And so to me, because I'm in this path, because I'm trying to decolonize, I was like, I'm not doing that, right? I'm not going to take on your name. Like, to me, that reinforces patriarchy. It reinforces this relationship of women belong to a man. Women are labeled by a man. Women are are owned by males. And if you look at the historical, reasoning for that, it's very European, right? It's a very Eurocentric concept. And so I wanted to talk about that, right? Because that's big, right? We're having kids, and like with family, we're talking about family and religion. Like, when I started this journey and I became very confident, very clear on what I was going to do and not do, I was very clear that I was not going to baptize my children, that I was not going to get married through a Catholic or Christian church, that none of those things were going to have anything to do with those religions and those ideas, because I'm trying to build a world where I can honor who I am and celebrate who I am, even as we go through these huge ceremonies, right? And so that I am very grateful that, my husband, my partner, that we both are aligned with that vision, because I was not willing to compromise that, right, with other people or whichever. To me, was like, this is what I'm trying to build. This is what I'm working towards. And if we have children and we do this, like, I want this to be the foundation that we raise our kids with, right? And we can speak like a whole other hour just on that. And although I don't have kids yet, I do have a lot of friends and family that will talk about that, right? And that we talk about raising a child. How do you raise a child and try to decolonize? It's a lot of things, right? It's a lot. Okay, so to end this part of the talk, it says machismo must be destroyed, right? We are taught to believe that machismo is embedded in our culture and natural to our gendered relations, but it is not. It is rooted in Eurocentric standards of male supremacy, backed by the religious world of Western white views. And why I say that is because Christianity and Catholicism, they are a mirror image of patriarchy. I know there's a lot of different interpretations to that, but basically in the Christian or Catholic religion, it centers male power, male divinity, male sacredness, right? And if you look at indigenous cultures, and again, I've talked about this in another class, say the sacred world, it's not just for men, right? The sacred world were for women. The sacred world was for children. The sacred world were for the elderly. And so when we're looking at these two world views, we see how the Christian Catholic view reinforces white supremacy terrorism, reinforces patriarchy, and then we have a complete clash with the indigenous worldviews, because indigenous worldviews tend to have a lot more diverse, inclusive, and fluid understanding of power, gender, and dynamics. So, yes. Okay, so now we're getting towards the end. we got like 10 more minutes to go. I hope you're all doing okay. I'm loving that you're engaging with each other and that you're having conversations. I'll be able to read them at the end. But this one, I think, is the most important lesson that I have learned and that I continue seeing other people do is humility and ignorance when it comes to decolonization, right? So let me put this down here. Okay. So decolonization, ego, and policing others. Oh my goodness, this is by far the biggest lesson and damage that I have seen in the way that many people start decolonizing, right? So let's get to it. So what do I mean by this? Okay, so what I mean by this is that we have to be very careful not to become the decolonial police, right? What does that mean? It means that I've noticed that there's a pattern of elitism during the initial waking process, a tendency to think you are better than someone else for knowing a truth, right? Or the truth. And so I don't I don't know, right? I don't know like okay, let me give you an example. Okay, let me go through this and I'll give you an example because it gets real. Okay, so you're not decolonized because, right? Many people start judging and policing others based on their understanding, again, their understanding of decolonization, drug use, religion, diet, etc. This can lead to shaming and canceling others for not abiding by your perspective on decolonization, right? I don't know if you see this, but I see this all the time. You're not decolonized. If you were decolonized, you wouldn't be eating hot Cheetos. Oh my goodness. If you were decolonized, you wouldn't be wearing lipstick. If you were decolonized, like, we're going to get to that right now. The last one is decolonization is fluid. Remember that decolonization is diverse and multi-layered. There is no hierarchy in this process, right? Be supportive and compassionate. We learn more. The more we learn, we have to teach, right? The more you learn, the more you have to teach, not the more we have to correct and shame. So let me give you an example. I started my decolonization journey when I was 15, right? And so at that age, you're young, you start learning how the world runs, you start learning about white supremacy terrorism, you start learning about all these things. And to me, it got to my head. I was like, damn, I know all this. I know we're not Hispanic or Latino. I know that, we survived genocide. And even though it's a very beautiful realization, it's a very beautiful knowledge to have, at the same time, it got to my head, right? And I was like, and I was reading Daily Life of the Aztecs, which is like kind of like a day-to-day journal of what the Mexica went through. And I was just like, if you care about your people, you wouldn't call yourself Hispanic or Latino, you wouldn't be Christian or Catholic. I was such a annoying, cutthroat, dogmatic little girl. Like, oh, I'm so annoyed with myself. Like, I honestly was that, right? And I was like, I would go up to people because at that time I was straight edge, right? That's another. So people that would drink or smoke, I would talk smack to them. People that maybe had like a Virgen de Guadalupe in their house, I would talk smack to them. It was just really bad, right? Because I was in this idea that you have to decolonize. That's the only way. And if you don't decolonize and if you don't stop doing all these European things, and you're a fake and you're a fraud. And so it took me, like, I would say like a year or two that life hit you real quick, right? Just realizing that I'm no better than anyone for knowing this. I'm no better, and I shouldn't feel that I'm more than anyone because I'm learning this, right? Because I know this. And the reason why I say this, and I feel that we have to talk about it, is because I notice this tendency nowadays. I notice that people that just start learning this history, that just start their journey, it's very dangerous because a lot of them are like, all of a sudden they want to check everyone. All of a sudden they want to go around and troll people and cancel people. And okay, like the reason why I say hot Cheetos, there's a story to that. I didn't just say that out of nowhere. The reason why I say hot Cheetos is because in my first relationship with my boyfriend who was decolonizing as well. Um, I remember, oh my goodness, I remember him telling me, oh, like you shouldn't be eating hot Cheetos. Like if you're down for your people, you should sacrifice that because that's not gonna help you. That's not helping our people's liberation. Like that's not decolonization. Like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And then I was with this brother from 19 to 23 or something. But you know what I'm saying? Like that's the conversations. And then as I got older and I luckily, grew out of that mindset, grew out of that phase of my life, I started noticing other people, right? I met other friends and other people in their circles who were having the same competitions with each other. Like, and it was like, what the heck? Is this happening? Is this part of the process? Like, what is going on? Literally, like I knew two brothers, right, that became roommates, and they had a fist fight because one told the other one, stop drinking, like you're drinking the white man's liquor, you shouldn't be doing that, and like that's not being decolonized. And then the other brother was already intoxicated and punched him in the face. And it's like, aren't we supposed to be helping each other? Like, we're, you know what I'm saying? So that the aspect of compassion, the aspect of building community, like it goes out the window when you become this self-absorbed elitist. Like, I know the right way, you know the wrong way. And it's very harmful and it's very toxic and it's very tragic. And believe me, I luckily I grew out of that. I was very young, and I had the right people in my life to set me straight. Like, little girl, you ain't nobody. Like, you need to get your act together. And I'm very grateful for that because as I'm older now, I see that, right? I see how in our community there's like, I don't know if it's because of power trip or because we think we're better, but I have witnessed it with people. Like, I'm telling you, these two brothers were amazing warriors, and they ended up getting in a fist fight. They both end up stopping their activism, and there goes warriors, right? So it's like we're losing people because we get caught up in this policing of each other and this whole thing about, we're better than this, we're better than that, and it's very harmful, and it's killing our generation of warriors, right? And the more we know, I hope, and I really hope that we feel more accountable to share more, right? We feel more accountable to share more, to make sure that we know that, right? And that's real. That's real. So yes, let's not police each other. Let's not go dissing each other. Like, the more, when you're in this journey, what we need is compassion. What we need is support. And yes, we are going to be held accountable. There is ways that we hold each other accountable, but let's be very mindful and remember your own ignorance. I think that's the biggest thing for me, is to remember your own ignorance, right? A lot of us take for granted what we know, take for granted the people that we grew up with, take for granted all this. And then all of a sudden it's like we think we're the middles, Anyway, so going on to a little bit more intense topics, right? Another thing that I come across a lot, and I get a lot of hate mail for this. I get so much hate mail. Sorry, you guys. 5 more minutes. 5 more minutes. Yes, I get so much hate mail for this. Okay, and I gotta speak on it because it's also part of the trauma of decolonization. So, hate, basically, I want to talk about decolonization, anti-LGBTQ, and anti-LGBTQ, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual, queer. It also includes, two-spirit, non-gender conforming. So all of our people that are identify as that, right? And also the anti-blackness. I have to get to this. So my understanding, based on what I've experienced and what I receive almost on the daily, is hate ideologies are rooted in white supremacy perspectives. Many folks claim decolonial thinking, but uphold anti-blackness and anti-LGBTQ, two-spirit ideologies, right? And I hear this all the time. Anytime I post or I talk about supporting our community, our two-spirit community, our LGBTQ community, anytime I do any of that, okay, I get attacked. I'm called Europe, that I'm being colonized. And I hear this one all the time. Homosexuality is European. So there's a group of people that think and believe that homosexuality came from Europe, that our people didn't, that none of our people on the continent were same gender loving, we're two spirited, we're mushes, like, you know what I'm saying? And so this whole expression is used to reinforce previous anti-LGBTQ sentiments, right? And I've noticed that this mainly comes from cis men and women, or like heteronormative, people. And I'm just like, wow, like, again, it's like the same thing like machismo. Like, I want to decolonize, but I want to keep my machismo. I want to decolonize, but I'm not down with gay people. I want to decolonize, like, and honestly, it's not like that is not the way we're gonna address and we're gonna heal from colonization, right? And if you understand our history, if basic history, you're gonna know that yes, homosexuality is all over the world. It doesn't belong to any specific ethnic group. There was many ways that people expressed being non-gender binary or gender fluid or two-spirit. Like there's indigenous cultures that actually honored and protected and upheld two-spirit individuals as sacred beings. There's the Mishe culture, the Mushe culture. There's so much diversity and so much love of all of our identities as indigenous people that we cannot fall to that whole, oh, homosexuality is European, or you're colonized because you're supporting LGBTQ. Like, this is real. And I'm telling you, anytime I talk about it, I share it, it becomes this, oh, she's promoting that, she's all about that. Like, I really question people's intentions and their own interpretation of these concepts. Like, why do they feel so threatened? Why are they so anti LGBTQ, anti two spirit? Like, I don't understand that. I don't understand that. But I also have to talk about it because this is damaging. This contributes to the hate. This contributes to the violence against our LGBTQ two spirit, community members. And this has to be called out. Right. And another one, okay, and this was more, I guess, recently, is the anti-Blackness in our community. Yes, that is also an aspect of white supremacy terrorism, right? So we have a lot of people that say Black people are not our allies, that, they don't care about us, right? So this is an ignorant expression that shows a disconnect of the reality that all people of color face, divide and conquer, right? And this is, like, by far, I can tell, a lot of us are raised in anti-Black communities. In my family, I was taught anti-Blackness, right? To this day, I have to fight it. I have to confront it. I have to challenge it because it's normalized in our culture, especially where it's at. Like, this is what we deal with, right? And I have to call it out. And yes, I get hate mail, and I get the worst hate mail when I talk about, supporting the Black and Brown community, Black and Brown unity. I get the worst attacks. Like, I'm not even going to share with you what type of things I get, but they are violent. They are disgusting. Like, I could report it to the police, but like, people say, oh, she must have a Black boyfriend. Oh, she must have a mixed child with a Black man. Like, they can't believe that I'm just about, supporting Black and Brown unity. Like, I must be invested in Blackness somehow. And it's crazy. It's crazy to me, the fact that people are so anti-Black, so isn't it? But then let's go to the other side of this. I'm going to get to the questions. Any books I recommend on Two Spirit? Yes. What is it called? The Flower and the Scorpion. That's a book that I recommend. The Flower and the Scorpion by Pete Segal. The Flower and the Scorpion talks about Mexica, sexuality, fluidity, and the sacred ceremonies that involve LGBTQ activities and ceremonies. So that's one of the books I recommend. Okay, so That's one of the things that we must confront, right? We must confront this anti-LGBTQ, anti-two-spirit, anti-blackness in our community. But there's also the flip side. So let's get to this. Okay, in talking about defending our community, decolonization, and the things to look out for, tips and suggestions, and how to deal with haters, this is very important, right? I hear this, I've been hearing this for 23 years. This is like, it doesn't go away. Like, it's crazy, right? So another one is Olmecs are African. I'm sure you've heard it. And my understanding of this is that this is an anti-indigenous attack on our unique and original creation, a civilization. Okay, we know that our ancestors, individually, uniquely, gave their own civilizations, created their own civilizations without the help or need or aid of any outside forces, right? That is scientifically proven, anthropologically proven, archaeologically proven. That's that. Okay. The other thing that I hear is the Mayans were created by aliens, or that aliens came and helped the Mayans. Like, this is not going away. Like, there's like specials on this, there's documentaries on this, and I'm just like, okay. And then another one that we hear, Mexicans are one of the lost tribes of Israel. I get this all the time. And I'm like, do you know that there's people in the world that have nothing to do with the Bible, and that's okay? Like, not everyone should be forced into the biblical narrative of humanity. Like, the Bible serves its purpose for its people, whoever wants to believe in it, but don't try to force us into a narrative that we have nothing to do with. Like, we were creating civilizations and thriving before the Bible was even created. And the Bible is a combination of ancestral stories from a bunch of other people that were not even European. So let's not even get into that. Let's not even get into that. But, and then the other one is, we're all mestizo anyway. That's another attack on our people, right? We're all mestizo anyway means there's no more indigenous people. We're all mixed. And I welcome you to check out my class where I talk about mestizaje and identity and how that's a white supremacist eugenics project to basically bleach, whiten up, and completely delete and dismantle indigenous people. So those are the four big attacks today here, right? And these are haters of our culture. These are haters of who we are. And we have to confront this. This is not real. This is pseudoscience. This all takes away from who we are as indigenous people. All of these arguments seek to completely deny us our authenticity, our science, our intelligence to be capable enough to even create a civilization. So do I believe that there was interactions? Maybe there were, right? But again, why is it that we as indigenous people are always seen as the recipients, of knowledge, of religion, of creation? Why don't people say, wow, well, maybe the Mayans went out to Africa, or maybe the Mayans went out to Cambodia? Like, again, it reinforces the notion that we were just stagnant people, just sitting on our continent, just waiting for people to bring us knowledge and civilization. So what does that do? It further, reinforces the idea that we were just stagnant and just stood here waiting for someone to bring us civilization. Like, and that is racist, that is anti-indigenous. Like, you cannot get more insulting than that, right? So everyone should be honored. We all should have the right to respect our ancestors, creations, contributions to the world, everyone equally, right? We shouldn't be sabotaged for our intelligence, but it is happening and we have to confront it. And lastly, we are getting to the end. So I thank you for hanging in there with me, but we had to get into it. Okay, so so this is my last words, right, for today's class. And a lot of people asked me about this, so I wanted to help you with some tools, hopefully to help you if you are navigating, if you're having a hard time with this, is, filter your life from haters. Life is sacred. So if we have an understanding that life is sacred, that in itself already should allow you to filter your life to a certain level, right? So basically, time is sacred and irreversible, right? Your interactions that you have with people, let it be productive and healthy, right? Especially me, we'll get into that. Spend time with people willing to learn, right? That's another advice that I would give you. Spend time with people that want to learn. Don't force them. Don't expect them to want to learn. There's willing people. There's people that are willing to know, willing to share. No need to waste time with devil's advocates. I get this all the time. Well, let me play devil's advocate. Or let me play devil's advocate. Let me ask you this question. Honey, the devil has plenty of advocates. What we need is our own people advocates, right? Another one, not everyone is going to care. Let me repeat that. Just because we are on this journey of decolonization and we are committed and we are like we're feeling this, right? We're on this journey. That doesn't mean that everyone else is too. Not everyone you meet that you share this information with or you have a conversation with, they're not all going to be like, yes, let's go decolonize. I'm down. Let's do it. Not everyone is going to care. And that's okay because there is so many of us that do. So again, let's focus on those who do care. My recommendation is ignore anonymous online trolls. Trust me, you can spend your precious time away with people you don't even know online, don't even have a picture of themselves. These can be agents that are on here trying to provoke you. These could be an ex-girlfriend, an ex-boyfriend trying to get you all crazy. I'm telling you, like, I recommend this because I used to get caught up. I used to like get all pissed off and cry and upset. And my advice is ignore anonymous online trolls. Just ignore them. Rather build on people. Block and delete haters. They love to see our reaction. That's another advice I give you. If people are going on your page, if people are emailing you, if people just to talk smack to you, just to throw you off, what you're doing, you don't have to. You're not obligated to respond to every hater, to every troll. Like, you're going to be so exhausted emotionally and mentally that it could lead you to burnout. It could lead you to give up on this whole idea of decolonization because of what it does, right? Don't feel that you have to convince anyone, right? Like I tell people, I do the work that I do because it's my calling. It's what fulfills me. It's what satisfies me. It's what makes me feel that I'm on this journey for my ancestors. I love sharing, right? I love teaching, but I'm not here to convince anyone, right? If people are down with it, cool. If people are not down with it, that's cool too. Like, nothing happens to me at the end of the day if people don't agree or want to talk smack or whatever. Trust me, I've been doing this for 23 years. I have received so much hate attacks. Like, I've received a lot of ugly stuff, right? So I cannot be so susceptible and vulnerable and sensitive to people who are committed to misunderstanding, to attacking me, because that's not healthy for my well-being. That's not healthy for my emotional well-being, and it's not going to lead me anywhere good. And live your truth. Live your truth. Live your truth. We're all different. We all understand things differently. I've changed a lot for a few years ago to now. I'm probably going to change some of the things I say now later on. Because guess what? When you know better, you do better. Right. And that's all of us. We have to remain compassionate with ourselves. We have to remain loving and supportive of ourselves first and foremost, because no one knows this journey more than you. No one knows what you need more than you. No one's going to advocate for you. No one is going to protect and defend you but you. So that's something that you have to be very careful with. So when you know better, do better. So don't beat yourself up. If you called yourself Hispanic last year and now you're not, and don't beat yourself up and now you understand something better than you did last year. Trust me, if you look at my YouTube videos from 2008, 2009, I've changed a lot, right? I've changed a lot. There's things I don't talk about anymore. There's things that are like, I'm like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? But hey, that was me at that particular time in my life. And that's what I thought. And that's what I expressed. Okay. So just to start wrapping it up, I thank you so much. We're going over about an hour we're doing about an hour and 20 minutes. These are some of the books that I recommend. There's so many books, but these are the ones that I recommend. For those of you who are starting your journey, a lot of these are available for free on a PDF file. I do have them available, a lot of them on PDF. We have an actual drive that Brother Cuitlawak created for us, so that way you can save yourself some money and you can access them as a PDF. So this is some of them, right? These are some of them in English. American Indian Contributions to the World, The Conquest of the New World, American Holocaust, The Other Slavery, talking about Native indigenous slavery, The Woman Who Turned into a Jaguar. This has a lot to do with gender dynamics and how we are not a machista society, and Race and Classification. So another one, these are in the Spanish language, right? These books are powerful. These books I highly recommend, especially this last one when we're talking about white supremacy, terrorism in Mexico. I have come across this historian as of the last year, going on 2 years, and I completely recommend him. I hope and wish this would be translated into English so a lot of more people could read it. But this is amazing. So check out these books. These are in Spanish language. And lastly, I want to say, Tlazo Kamati, thank you. If you can, please fill out the Google form. I'll make it available in the video description as soon as I upload this on YouTube right now. And stay tuned for more recordings. I have a couple of speaking engagements. I actually will be uploading. I gave a talk for nawat.com. It's the Nawat resource. I was invited to speak on my thesis, and I will be posting that recording soon. And I have also been invited to speak at the University of Stanislaus in October for Indigenous Peoples Day. So I look forward, hopefully I can record that live for everybody. And so, yes, so that's that. And lastly, what's next? Like I said, I'm going to try to do these classes once a month. I don't have a topic yet for Decolonize, E-Decolonize number 12. Most likely, I will do it on the whole idea of conquest and colonization, because it is centered around Christopher Columbus. So that's going to be Sunday, October 11th, 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So stay tuned for that. I will announce it here. I will announce it on my Facebook and my my website. So stay tuned. Our next class, number 12, will be on Sunday, October 11th, Pacific Standard Time. And that concludes our class, everyone. Wow, we got through it. I'm sorry I was a little late, and we're ending a little bit later as well. Just gonna say what's up to everyone before we head out. Diana, thank you. Martin Salazar, thank you. Indy Jean, thank you. Diana, Jessica, thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you all. I hope you stay well, stay safe, stay beautiful, stay resilient. And I'm gonna make this live accessible right now as soon as I let everyone go. So until next time, Tlazo Kamati, much love to everyone. Let's stay focused. Let's stay compassionate. Let's stay resilient. Let's stay powerful and decolonizing. So without further ado, I will let you all go. So have a beautiful weekend, beautiful summer. Nos vemos pronto. Tlazo Kamati.